Let's. So the first question, what are these different terms? Atma, Mana, Buddhi, subtle body, right? So basically Atma equals to soul, which never dies and moves from body to body. So that is the first one. Obviously, then the question is, what is mana, right? Mana is mind. And mind all doesn't go together, goes with buddhi, intelligence, and false ego. False ego is ahankar. Ahankaram vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. So mind, intelligence, and false ego, man, buddhi, or ahankar. These are the three things that are around the soul. So that forms subtle body. So what is subtle body? It is a combination of these three things. So mind plus intelligence plus false ego. Everybody has this. Dogs, cats, animals, plants, birds, everybody has this. Human beings, devatas, like the demigods, everybody has these three things. So when we die, we carry subtle body along with the soul. So when we die, we carry the subtle body along with the soul.
Okay.
We leave the gross body here. Hare Krishna. So we are just going through some Q&A. If you have any questions, we will also address that, Mataji. So first question that Manan asked was, what is Atma, Mana, Buddhi, subtle body? There's so many terms flying around, just needed clarification. So I'm answering those questions. So we leave the gross body made out of earth, water, fire, air, ether, etc. So we leave these things when we die. So in every life, we leave the gross body here, but the subtle body we are carrying. When we do the liberation, we leave the subtle body here. So which means mind, intelligence, and false ego, you just leave here. So then how do you function in the spiritual world? We get a spiritual body with its own mind, intelligence, and ego. There will not be false ego at that point. So false ego is the real cause for the soul to stay here. So false ego is the culprit. What does it do? It perpetuates. Perpetuates means it keeps on going the material existence. Spiritual body with spiritual mind. This means spiritual means purified mind, basically. Purified mind plus purified intelligence. So now let's see. Manan, you have any further questions that we should go deeper on these?
Sure. Yes. So let's try to delve deeper into the nature of mind and intelligence. That is one. Other is I also see the term chitta. I'm wondering where does that fall?
Okay.
In this?
Chitta is consciousness, right? So right now, our consciousness is attracted to matter. So we love our iPads more than we love our wives, like that. I mean, that may not be true in all cases, but people like matter. That is our consciousness right now is attracted to matter. we need to shift that to the Supreme Krishna. So this whole thing is about shifting our consciousness. Your consciousness is not going to go anywhere. Sometimes you hear the term Antakarana Suddhi. Antakarana Suddhi means you are purifying consciousness. So you're purifying the chitta. So the chitta is right now attracted to matter. We just need to shift it. That's why our organization is called International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Everybody is conscious of something, of matter especially. So we need to shift that consciousness to spiritual consciousness.
So consciousness is not, so chitta is not a body or an entity in itself. It is a phenomena. It's consciousness and awareness. Is that right?
Yes. So chitta is you could call it an energy, but basically it is a constituent. Like you have a body with the 5 senses. Above the senses are the mind. Above the mind is intelligence. And above the intelligence is the soul. So soul is the central aspect. So consciousness is actually at the soul platform. It is not at the mind or body platform, or even for that matter, intelligence platform. You can use your intelligence to direct the mind towards a Krishna consciousness as opposed to a material consciousness.
I see. So consciousness doesn't reside on the subtle body, it resides in the soul, right?
So consciousness is a fundamental characteristic of the soul. It is not even in the subtle body. It's even higher than the subtle body.
What about thinking, feeling, and willing? Are they connected to chitta? Are they in the subtle body? Are they in the soul?
According to my understanding, yeah, that is a very good point. Let me write down thinking, feeling, and willing are at the consciousness platform. And consciousness is a characteristic of the soul. So, which is who you are, rather than the mind, intelligence, and false ego are attachments or appendages to the soul.
So if thoughts, feelings, and will are all coming from the soul, consciousness is also at the soul, what exactly is mind, intelligence, and false ego doing?
Mind, intelligence, and false ego is just like if you have a computer, they say it is a CPU, then you need a RAM and you need the serial bus and then you need the hard disk. All these are appendages to the CPU. Without the CPU, none of these will function. And without the mind, intelligence, and false ego, there is no external expression of your consciousness. So these are accessories that will allow you to manifest your activities, your thoughts, right? Even thoughts as in not the mental thoughts. The desire of the soul is expressed through the mind, intelligence, and false ego.
So when we say Cheto Darpanam Arjanam, are we purifying the chitta or are we purifying the mind?
Cheto Darpana, very, very good question. Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Okay. Chetana means consciousness. But then there is no external expression of consciousness without the mind and intelligence. So indirectly, you are purifying the mind. But the goal is to purify the consciousness. Purify. Let me spell it right. Purifying the mind. But in reality, you are always purifying your consciousness.
So can we think about this as like the Cheto Darpana mind is the mirror of the consciousness, it's mirroring our consciousness. Is that how to think about it?
Yeah, like for example, you have an electric motor, unless you
Sorry, your
take the
speaker has lost internet connection.
Sorry about that.
yeah. So if you have an electric motor, how do you know that the motor is spinning? You have to put a little gear on the outside of the shaft, and when the motor is spinning, you can take the energy from the gears to a bigger gear and then connect it to some other device, and that device is moving back and forth. Otherwise, motor is spinning silently, and then there is nothing happening. So in order for your consciousness to express itself, you need the tool of the mind. And then intelligent mind is again what? It's just like random access memory. There's a lot of thoughts in there. The intelligence which is superior to the mind and which is closer to your consciousness is directing the mind to say, Are Baba, this is good for you, this is not good for you.
So, okay, maybe come back to this, but this nature of mind and intelligence, I've heard like different things. Sometimes mind is described as the reins in the chariot example. Sometimes it's described as the, like the hard disk or the RAM in a computer. Sometimes it's described as the one which accepts and rejects. Sometimes it's described as a storehouse of impressions.
Right.
So, so I'm not clear exactly how to understand the mind.
Well, all of the above, right? I mean, all of the above. It is an external expression of your consciousness. So yes, you need some place to store. So mind is a storehouse. Sankalpa vikalpa, accepts and rejects. So somebody has to say, no, I don't want it. This smells just bad. That smells good, right? So sankalpa vikalpa again, the mind goes through that type of ups and downs, right? So all these are manifestations, external manifestations of the conscious will. Again, that comes to your other question around free will. We'll come to that later.
So is it a storehouse of impressions, or is it something which actually does the acceptance and rejection? Is it like, like storehouse just seems like a store, it's a box which contains things.
My mind is more or less a storehouse. It is the intelligence, using the intelligence on the mind. What you do is you do a pattern recognition. So the Sankalpa Vikalpa technically is driven by the intelligence. So what does intelligence say? I came to this situation. If I cross this street on a red light, I may get into an accident because of some impression that has been made on you by your parents or the police officer or your friends that it is not good to cross on a red light. So that Sankalpa Vikalpa technically is the interface between mind and intelligence. But mind is more or less a storehouse of impressions, more or less. But there are other functions too.
So when we think about mind as controlling the senses, like the rain example in the chariot, how does that work? How is mind like a controller of senses? As it's
yes, senses, just like if you have a robot, there are sensors. One is like there's a lens which you are using as a vision gathering sense. There is some kind of a microphone that you're using as a sound gathering sense. But then in and itself, each one of these sense doesn't have the impulse to drive itself. So mind is basically, in a way, I mean, there might be a lot of functions to the mind. In a way, it is saying, based on this pattern, okay, now you open your eyelids and you gather this information because I want you to gather this information at this point based on the pattern that I'm seeing. Like, for example, in danger situation, you are hearing a car screech to a halt, like that. Then you sense danger, right? So immediately the mind is instructing the eyes to look that way to see if that danger is going to somehow impact you or not, right? So mind does certain amount of direction, but mind is more or less robotic, right? It is saying, okay, oh, sound, danger, look. But intelligence then gathers these images and uses references against the patterns in the mind and says, oh, that's okay. It is just, a car was about to hit a different car. It came to a halt. So there is no danger. Let's move on. Right?
So can we think about, I don't know if you're aware of this system 1 and system 2 thinking. the book called Slow and Fast Thinking.
Yeah, I know. I
where,
am familiar with that. Yes. Mhm.
So can we think about mind as that fast thinking and intelligence as a slow thinking, or the limbic brain and the executive function? The mind is the one which is the impulsive responses that we have to stimuli.
Yeah. This
And
is this is this is where the analogy breaks down, because
Mhm.
that slow thinking, fast thinking, almost all of your psychology is based on Sigmund Freud's theory, right? So Sigmund Freud, like, he got attracted to his own mother when he was going through a train in Switzerland. So he says that everything is driven by sex, sexual thoughts. So he's have a more or less half crazy fellow who came up with his theory, and then now rest of the world latched on to that theory. And although there are parallels to this and that, most of the current thinking is based on fear, right? So based on fear of something happening, and that's kind of tied to the Darwin's theory of evolution, that only the strongest survive. So it's all based on that fear theory. So that is where this analogy breaks down. Krishna's psychology theory is slightly different. It is saying that yes, you are doing sankalpa and vikalpa based on the stimulus received, but then you have the concept of free will not to even do sankalpa and vikalpa. You have the free will to do go in a totally different direction, not even operate on a sensual platform. Almost all of the world is operating on a sensual platform, right? So that's where I think the analogy ends, and Bhagavad Gita takes off in a different direction altogether.
So which analogy are you saying? Which analogy is breaking
Well,
down?
the slow thinking and fast thinking, technically you can equate it to what I said earlier. However, I think the analogy kind of breaks down there. And from that point on, we have to go in two different paths. One is this whole Sigmund Freud, Freudian thinking, psychology, and the other is the psychology described by Krishna, how the senses are actually troubling you and causing you trouble actually in this material world.
So the analogy is mind is like fast thinking and intelligence is like slow thinking. That the analogy you're talking about?
Yeah, that's the analogy I was talking about. So until that point, everything works fine. But from that point on, the slow thinking, fast thinking book, I think I've read it in the past. It takes off the Freudian psychology as the basis for its analysis. So most of the modern human resources recruiting in the world is using that type of approach.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is the description about the origin of fast thinking and slow thinking is either Darwinian or Freudian.
Correct.
And you're saying that origin of that model is different in the Vedic understanding.
Correct.
But just to understand mind intelligence, is it reasonable to think about mind as this impulsive thing and the intelligence as a more slow thinking, which is more rationalizing or more reasoning kind of response?
No, yes, no, yes and no, because if
Mhm.
your intelligence is strong, trained by the scriptures, then you can train the mind to make it very, very strong. Then the mind doesn't need to rely so much on intelligence. It will start making correct decisions on its own. So the mind can be trained to be a slow thinker also.
Okay, that's very interesting. Because when I thought about mind being a good friend or mind being trained, I thought the idea was that your natural responses or your impulsive responses are favorable rather than unfavorable. So it's still impulsive, but is that your impulses are different now? The impulses have been purified.
The impulses have been purified, and mind trained by higher intelligence will start making right decisions as a slow thinker or super slow thinker, right? So Arjuna says, my mind is flying. I can control the wind, but I cannot control the mind. What does Krishna say? He says it's lust only, Arjun, coming from the mode of passion, rajoguna samudbhavaha, he says, right? So if we control that passionate nature, all of a sudden the mind purified becomes very, very intelligent. So that's what I'm saying. So mind this fast thinking mind can be made into an extremely slow thinking mind. And at that point, intelligence will only do an occasional check-in. So it doesn't have to like constantly coach the mind on a minute by minute basis. So in a way, whole of Bhagavad Gita is about mind control. In a way, it is about mind and sense control, right? As you purify your intelligence by reading the scriptures and following the dictates of the higher authority, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at that point, if the mind is trained sufficiently, then mind can make very, very good decisions.
So when you're thinking about mind becoming slow, are you thinking about this mind becoming still, or this?
No, the mind becoming slow and mind becoming still are two different concepts. Mind becoming still is the department of nirvana meditation, right? So you are basically shutting out all thoughts and making it empty. Whereas mind becoming slow, at least to loosely use that analogy, we are using the higher intelligence that's coming from scriptures so that you don't make quick irrational decisions.
So are you saying quick decisions are always irrational?
Not necessarily, but they usually tend to be, if they are not well guided by the scriptural basis, you can make a lot of mistakes. Like, for example, year 2000, when the stock market crashed, some people of Indian origin who were in America, they committed suicide. Okay, they lost some money, but is it so bad that they should commit suicide? No. But somehow their mind was totally engulfed with this grief, and their intelligence was not trained by higher authorities. So they felt that, oh, I lost so much money, I lost a couple of million, so I should kill myself. And they killed themselves.
So the example is to say that quick decisions can sometimes be irrational.
Sorry, what was that?
So your example is to illustrate that quick decisions can sometimes be irrational.
Yes, but not
Obviously,
always.
yeah.
Not always.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, yeah, no debate that quick decisions can be irrational. When mind is trained by intelligence, the nature of the mind at that point, what will be a good reference for that, where the mind which is actually trained and controlled, that is being described?
Yeah, that is the whole topic of Bhagavad Gita, right? Arjuna is asking a lot of questions. Krishna gives him superior knowledge from the scriptures. And Arjuna says, Yata cheste tata kuru. Whatever you want, Krishna, I will follow, because now you have opened my eyes. You have given me this, understanding of these mind, senses, intelligence, false ego, duty. You have given me all this information. Therefore, now I will follow your authority. So that's one symptom of how a person was confused or supposedly confused at beginning of Gita, and by end of Gita, based on all of this information that Krishna provides, the person is now quote unquote enlightened and he's making the right decision. Okay, based on what you said, my duty as a Kshatriya is to fight. There have been breakages in dharma. There are different modes of material nature, and I'm under those influence. Now you have corrected my thinking from the mind, which is unnecessary, and therefore I'll follow your instructions. So that is one way to look at it, one symptom of a purified mind.
Right. So like there's this whole section talks about Citta Pragya, study intelligence. One intelligence study, what is that like? I was wondering if there are similar descriptions about when the mind is controlled, what that is like. Like there are many places where, or actually a few places where Arjuna is saying, mind is so difficult to control, it's more difficult to control than the wind. Krishna says, yes, we can do it by practice and by renunciation. You mentioned this third chapter where he talks about why do I do things even if I don't want to? And Krishna says, because of lust and anger born out of passion. I don't remember any places where the description of, like you're saying, like when the mind is controlled, is trained by intelligence, then it becomes slow and it doesn't need intelligence anymore or as much, because it can now it seems like it can do the work of intelligence, is how it sounded.
Yeah, but very quickly, Krishna changes gears and goes off into a different direction, right? So he focuses on the mind, intelligence, false ego, senses for a while. Then he gives knowledge about the spiritual world, na tad bhashyate suryo ashashanka pavakaha, like, anyway. So there are a lot of descriptions. So he just touches upon mind intelligence in a certain level. That's it. He doesn't go into greater depth. Then he says that there are these various techniques around karma, around jnana, around bhakti. He declares bhakti to be the supreme. And then he spends a good amount of time on what the nature of the soul is in that state of bhakti. And he chooses to give more information on bhakti rather than other topics. And again, once he comes to the three modes of material nature, chapter 14, he goes into great level of depth, how the soul is impacted by these three different modes. So yeah, he pretty much stops the mind discussion early in the Bhagavad Gita. Then he goes off in a different direction. As it is said, it is only a summary study of the Vedas. So Bhagavad Gita touches upon a few things pretty rapidly, and finally it comes to the point of sarva dharman parityaja, leave all the kinds of dharmas or duties and simply surrender unto me. If you surrender, then I'll take care of you. So he doesn't dwell on mind. He says, okay, I just gave you a little bit of information. Ultimately, the goal is to make you to surrender to him so that you don't wander in this material world, making mistakes life after life. Yeah, so the goal is very different. It's not about an elaborate study of the mind. It's not a psychology course, although there is a little bit of psychology. Mostly the goal is to train the soul to get out of this material world.
So is surrendering done by the mind?
What do you think?
I don't know. It seems I'm still not very clear about what exactly
surrendering is not surrendering is not done by the mind. Surrender is a decision taken by the soul. But then the soul cannot take that arbitrary decision. The intelligence purified by the scriptures coaches the mind to say, okay, now you have played this monkey business for many, many lifetimes. Let's put an end to this sankalpa vikalpa. Let's put an end to this sense gratification. All these senses are chasing so many things and putting the mind and intelligence in a troublesome situation. Right? So surrendering is always done by the soul, but it still needs the help of the intelligence, which purifies the mind so that the mind doesn't go hither and thither and wander off, and senses are not troubling. By which time, by the time you are making the decision to surrender, the senses are reasonably under control. Just like if you want to stop somewhere, the horses of your chariot or the 183 horsepower engine of your car has to start shutting down. Otherwise, you cannot make a stop in a reasonable time, right? So that's exactly what is being attempted here. The intelligence is purifying the mind are purifying the senses, controlling them. And then when the soul says, okay, now everything is coming to a final grand finale. So now I'm ready to surrender to Krishna. Although surrender is not a point in time, it's a gradual decision. Initially, people surrender by giving up bad habits for the senses, like drinking alcohol, eating meat, illicit activities outside of marriage. So that's also surrender at a certain level, not full surrender, but you have already started controlling your senses. Then gradually, that is easy actually. Controlling the mind is more difficult because it is all the vasanas and samskaras for millions of years are still trapped in the mind, and mind is a part of the subtle body, right? So subtle body is coming from body to body for millions of lifetimes. So what's happening is taming that mind becomes a bigger challenge. So you are seated in Padmasana, you're trying to, or you have already controlled your senses. Suddenly in the mind, some thought comes, oh, what if I did this? So you open your eyes and you go off to execute that thought, right? Because of this repository from millions of years, those thoughts will come to the surface. Just like the lake is always very tranquil. However, there will be some earth moving at the bottom of the lake. One such small movement will cause a small bubble of air to be released between earth pores. Because air, earth is basically what? 25% air, 25% water, and about 50% minerals. I was just learning this in the University of Cornell, Cornell University course on soil science. So that little air bubble will come from the bottom of the lake, and all of a sudden the placid or tranquil surface of the water gets disturbed. So one thought from 1 million lifetimes ago can come and bother you today, even though you are fully a yogi and you've controlled all your senses, shut them off, and say, don't you dare again trouble me, you senses. But still, this little thought from long time ago will come and bother you. So surrender is an ongoing process. Initially, you'll surrender by controlling your senses. Only eating prasadam, for example, that is controlling senses instead of eating in McDonald's. So gradually you do that. But then control of the mind comes through purified intelligence. You purify the mind. Then through purified intelligence, you really once and for all make a decision. I'm sick and tired of this repeated birth and death. And therefore, let me see which scripture talks about how I can get out of this painful situation, the material situation. And then more information is given to you, right? Scriptures will have more information, and then you assimilate that. And then hopefully by the time of death, you would have fully surrendered. Initially, there is some surrender, but it's not full.
So there is acceptance and rejection by mind, and there is this acceptance and rejection by the soul. Like, surrender is I accept Krishna and I reject material world, or I reject Krishna and I accept material world.
Correct. So there is acceptance and rejection at the mind, intelligence, false ego, and the soul levels, all 4 levels. What is false ego? False ego is rejecting Krishna or the creator and trying to do things on your own. And then we have tried this for many lifetimes, and then we'll try to continue to do it this life also. At some point, we'll say, oh, this is too tough. Let me figure out if there is an easier way. And hopefully the scripture will tell you at that point, if you are reading the right stanza and you understand it and your guru helps you with that, then you say, okay, I think I'm placing too much faith in my own ability. Let me place more faith in Krishna's ability to deliver me. So yeah, there is acceptance and rejections happening everywhere, but predominantly it is the function of the intelligence to guide that acceptance and rejection of the mind.
So this Antakarana Shuddhi, where is this coming from?
It is coming not from Prabhupada's books, but it is coming from a different set of literature, but it's, again, the goal is the same. Antakarana means your internal consciousness. Shuddhi means purification. It's just a Sanskrit term, that's all.
Okay, it's not from Bhagavad Gita.
Not from Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, but if you go through the vast slew of literature, and again, I don't know where I learned it from, but essentially it is purifying your consciousness. Prabhupada has given so many other advanced literatures, right? If you go through some of those, there are references to how the consciousness can be purified. Bhagavad Gita is just the introduction. Then we go
But,
to...
it's not, okay, it's not a term in Bhagavad. When I say Bhagavad
It's
Gita,
not,
I mean,
no, yeah, exactly. It's not a term from the Bhagavad Gita, no.
So is it same as this Chitta Vritti Nirodha of...
Yeah, it is very similar to Cheto Darpana Marjanam.
I'm saying Chitta Vritti Nirodha.
Yeah, Chitta Nitya Virodha, that is an advanced concept too. Basically, Virodha means what? Nirodha means what? Elimination. Elimination of your troublesome impressions on your consciousness. So yeah, Chitta Nitya Virodha, my guru talks about that a lot, Bhakti Vikas Swami Maharaj. So again, I cannot claim to understand everything that he has said, but my understanding is yes, you can, Nirodha means eliminate those negative impressions that are forming on your consciousness through emphasizing the positive, which is all the things that we do, chanting Hare Krishna, eating prasadam, things of that sort.
I see. I see. Okay, and you said that plants also have mind intelligence and false ego. Do you have any reference which establishes that plants also have mind intelligence and false ego?
Srila Prabhupada says in one of the purports that all living entities have consciousness.
Consciousness, yes, but mind intelligence and false ego.
They have a very dull mind, very dull intelligence, very dull false ego. Actually, they have false ego. That's why they became a tree to begin with. So I cannot readily give you the reference from where I read it, but I was just paraphrasing Srila Prabhupada's purports, which I read across many literature. So I don't remember exactly where I read it. But every one of us has, every living entity which has a soul. I mean, every living entity is a soul, has a mind, however dull it might be, intelligence, however dull it might be, and false ego, however gross or dull it might be. When somebody misuses previous births, it's said that they become a tree, right? We see that in the Krishna book when Nalukuvara and Manigriva were cursed to be the trees because their behavior was so bad that their consciousness was to be lowered to a certain degree. Because of their expression of that false ego to a higher degree, they were put in that lower body. That's what we read from the Krishna book. So it is, I'm paraphrasing again, but all living entities are supposed to have mind, intelligence, and false ego. Because when the tree is liberated from its current body, it obviously won't go into spiritual world. It has to go through a few other intermediate lifetimes and then come to a human form of life, right? Usually human body is supposed to be the vehicle for liberation. Although on occasion in scriptures, you will see certain animals directly being liberated, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu throws some prasadam into the lake or river, lake, I think. And then the disciples see some of the fish attain 400 Narayana forms and simply just head towards Vaikuntha. And they were surprised. How can these living entities directly get liberated? Again, I've not done too much research into that particular topic, but it is said in scriptures that there are a few border cases, but for the most part, it is the human life where you can get liberated at a much faster pace. Like Krishna says, right? There are certain living entities. It's like a living entity in a womb, right? Very difficult to, if somebody is in the womb, for them to understand anything that you're saying. But for human beings, you just scratch the surface, they understand what is being said. And trees, he also mentions, like human beings, trees, and some things which are deep tied in the womb. So for trees, it's very difficult to wake them up. They have consciousness, but it's very dulled at this point. So yeah, as far as my understanding goes, yeah.
So all the examples that you have given, and I think there are definitely evidences for how the soul transmigrates from one body to another, and the different species of life have different capacities. So the soul does have consciousness, and that consciousness is at various levels of expression in different bodies. My understanding about plants was that the consciousness is very dull. They have a physical body and they have a very limited subtle body, which has only the very basics of life symptoms, which allows for growth and assimilation and such, but they don't have mind, intelligence, and those aspects of the subtle body. Um,
Let's test that theory out, right? Because the soul is surrounded by the subtle body, mind, intelligence, false ego. Then
Not necessarily. Only. So that's the question. Does it always have to be? Or
otherwise, when the soul who is in this plant body, eventually that soul goes into a lion's body and a cow's body and then comes to human body, those faculties are suppressed and they are weak, but they are not zero. Otherwise, how are they suddenly acquiring mind, intelligence, and false ego in a lion's body?
I mean, just like it acquires the physical body, it can also acquire the subtle
No,
body.
it is not an acquisition. No, I don't agree.
So how does it get the subtle body in the first place then?
The subtle body always exists, regardless of which body you are in. The subtle body always exists.
It means the subtle body is eternal?
Subtle body is not eternal from that perspective. Subtle body is always following or rather encircling the soul as it migrates from body to body. But when you get to liberation, remember I wrote here, we leave the subtle body when we are liberated.
That's right. So we're saying that just like we leave the physical body at death, we leave the subtle body at the point of liberation. So I understand that. That's why I said that the subtle body is also acquired because it's not part of the soul. It is different from the soul.
Yeah, it is acquired. However, as you are transmigrating, your subtle body is your code. So how do you remember from your past, the samskaras and vasanas from the past million years? So subtle body, the mind, is that repository of those thoughts that are going from body to body. So I'm pretty sure that subtle body is not, it's suppressed, but it's not extinguished when it is in the plant of a tree, in the body of a tree.
And that subtle body doesn't change. It remains the same with the soul. So when the soul enters the material world, when it carried by Shambhu and impregnated into the world, at that time it acquires the subtle body and then it remains the same till it gets liberated. Is that the idea?
That is my understanding. From time to time, it could be suppressed, but it never is extinguished.
I see. I
have not seen any evidence. I've been reading Prabhupada's books for 17, 18 years. I have not seen evidence where he says that the subtle body has been extinguished. On the other hand, the Buddhists, the Nirvanas, they say that everything is extinguished. Even your soul is extinguished.
Sure. That's different. That's a different philosophy altogether then. But so if you have some evidences about how the subtle body is present in plants also, that'll be really helpful. Because
it becomes a theoretical exercise. My focus is on how I can liberate myself rather than go into deep research, right? My job is not to be a deep researcher. My job is to be more focused on take the key aspects of this philosophy and process, apply it and get out. When we are sinking in Lake Sammamish, the goal is to get out of Lake Sammamish, not think about how deep is Lake Sammamish. Are there algae here? Are there any fish that are going to come and bite me? No, my goal is to get out as quickly as possible because the Gyanis do that. They do a lot of research into the depth of the philosophy. That's not my job or my interest. My interest is to get out of this material world as fast as possible by taking to the positive aspects, take the tools and techniques, and accelerate the process.
Okay.
The Gyanis do that very well, but we are not Gyanis, we are Bhaktas. Quickly surrender to Krishna, get out.
Sure.
Okay, Sujana Mataji, I know you're also there patiently listening. Do you have any thoughts, questions?
No, Prabhuji, it was very nice. Like I felt like Bhagavad Gita was asking just live here. Like Arjuna asks Krishna. Mananji was asking you and you were responding. Very nice. And I'm glad I joined. the discussion. I mean, at least I'm listening. That's
Very
all.
nice. Yeah.
Mananji, I just wanted to add, definitely it starts with a lot of questions. What helps is coming every week to the class, and what, when you start analyzing, the things will change in your day-to-day life, and that gives you a lot of, as you were talking, chitta vritti nirodha. So your chitta, your intelligence, your inner peace, you will see the difference.
Mhm.
So it starts with a lot of questions for sure, and I'm glad you are asking all these questions, and not many people are there such a great way to accomplish those. Um, all I would say is just without all this knowledge also, if you take a pause before you react in a different way, right? Like the reaction will become a response in a way. Whereas with all this knowledge, at least um, instead of sending, it's a very old statement, but instead of sending a message or email today, maybe you'll send tomorrow, rather than that reaction of, go, 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 go kind, what we have been trained so much from childhood that you should not delay even a minute kind, will change. That's what your intelligence is talking. And I know Prabhuji has given way, way better examples. I personally see it, but if you can come every week, at least try it out and see if it makes any difference in your life, in your thought process, in the way you react and respond. And it works for me with my kids, with my own family, so I can see it live, and I can see the changes, and how I can apply Bhagavad Gita in my day to day with whatever I'm just learning. I mean, I'm learning really small, but that's what I thought I'll share.
Yes, thank you, Mani.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll stop there for this week, and we'll continue next week, if that's okay.
Yes, yes, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Okay.
Prabhuji, you should mention this in the group. I think this is a good video to for everybody to to hear.
Yeah. Thank you. I will upload it to YouTube and I'll share it in the group.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Okay. Thank you very
Hare
much for
Krishna.
both of you coming. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.